In this video, I'm going to show you how to configure SSH for GitHub on 3 different operating systems, Linux, Windows, and macOS, so stick around. I will be walking step by step through the configuration of SSH for use with GitHub. I'll be using a guide. I will post a link below in the comments section to this guide. But I'll be going step by step through this. And to start off, I'd like to go through the 10,000 foot view, if you will. Let me just scroll down. Okay. And let's talk about some assumptions, and then I'll go through the process steps, and then I'll get right into how to configure. Okay, so for first off, the reason you need SSH, right, for GitHub is because you can't log in, you can't commit to the repo with passwords in GitHub, right? So you want to have a secure connection between your repository, your remote repository, which will be GitHub in this case, and your local repository. So the assumptions here are you have a GitHub account. Okay, so if you don't have a GitHub account, you need to make one. And on Windows, let me pull my Windows VM up over here. I'm assuming, I'll make this a little bit bigger, that you're using Git Bash. So Git Bash does a couple things for you. It's actually Git for Windows. You install Git for Windows, and it provides a Bash shell. Now, you know, if you folks are not, you Windows users are not used to Bash, I understand that, right? You've got, you know, PowerShell and command line, right? But when I teach classes, I like to put everybody on equal footing with regards to the shell that we're using. That way all my examples work the same, okay? So let me make this text bigger. My VM sometimes have a mind of its own. And I think to do that, I need to come to options. Give me 1 second, text, and I'm going to select, it's at 16 point right now. I think I'm going to make it 22. Let's see what that does. 22. Ooh, maybe, yeah. Apply. That should be fine. Let me make it 24. Apply. So I'm hoping that everyone can see this. All right. There we go. So Git for Windows gives you the Git Bash terminal. And here you can type Linux commands like ls-al, like that. And ssh-keygen, which is what you'll need. And I'll just hit Control-C to get out of there. We're not quite ready to start. Okay, but anyway, I just wanted to say for Windows, we're going to be using that. For macOS, we're just going to be using terminal or iTerm. I recommend iTerm. And let that crank up here. There we go. Dismiss tip. And let me make this a little bit bigger. So also too, right, I'm using the Bash shell on all these terminals. So I'll make that even bigger so we can see it from wherever you're watching your video. This is the Bash shell. Also too, on the Windows, it's Git Bash, so that's a Bash shell that's running there. And on Linux, I'll be using a terminal emulator called Terminator. You can use just regular old terminal, that doesn't matter. And we're running we're running Bash here as well. So let me set the preferences and make the font bigger so we can all see it from the screen. A lot of the steps are the same. I'm going to change the font to 24. Let me just ratchet up the font size a little bit. 24. There we go. Select and apply, close. All right, so that everyone should be able to see that from wherever you're at. All right, so I'm going to be showing you how to do this on Linux, Mac OS and Windows. All right, so I've got 3 VMs running here. All right, so the process overview. Let's just go over the 10,000 foot view here. What we're going to do is we're going to verify the existence of a SSH directory. It's a hidden directory. It's .ssh. If you were to go there, I'm going to use Mac OS here, but it'd be the same on Windows. If you opened up your local, now the tilde, right? The tilde means your home directory. So I'm going to go to my home directory on my machine here, and normally you can't see the hidden directories, right? But we're not going to be using these window file explorers. We're going to be using terminals. If I pull over the Mac OS terminal or my Mac OS VM, and I type, I'm in a temp directory now. I'm going to change directory back to the home directory, and clear the screen and do a list the directory. And I'm going to scroll up, and you can see, I'm sorry, it's a little jumpy here. You see right here, I have a .ssh directory. So that's what you're verifying. Okay, just make sure you have a .ssh in your home directory. If you do not, then create it. All right, we'll get to that in a second. We're still at the 10,000 foot view. So in other words, you want to verify the existence of or create your .ssh directory. Next, and I recommend this because if you haven't generated keys before, then you'll probably screw it up a few times until you get what you really want. So create a temp directory in your home directory to practice key generation. And then generate public and private SSH keys. This happens at the same exact time when you actually generate the key. You're going to get 2 keys. You're going to get a private key and a public key. It's that public key that you're going to share with GitHub, and then you're going to register your private key to your computer so that it knows where it's located. Okay. And then, once you're ready to, once you've got your keys generated, the next step is copy the private and public keys to the .ssh directory. And then you're going to add the public key to your GitHub account. And then you're going to add the private key to your local machine's SSH Agent. And then we're going to test the keys. We're going to test them 2 different ways. We're going to make sure that GitHub can actually recognize your key, and then it works with a repo, right? Yeah, pretty much guaranteed that if GitHub recognizes it, then it's just a matter of testing it with the repo. It will work. All right. So then I'm just going through the steps in this guide. So I'm going to start with section 4, which is all operating systems. And that's where we'll continue in the next section. For section 4, we're going to perform these steps for all operating systems. That means we're going to do the same thing on Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. I'm going to pull over my Mac OS, and I'll switch it up here. But first off, we're going to verify the existence of or create the .ssh directory. Now, I've already done this, right? So I can do a ls tac al, right? And get the listing, and we see that I have that .ssh directory. If you don't have the .ssh directory, then you can just create it with the makedir command, mkdir .ssh, right? But you don't want to write over it if it already exists. What you might want to do is check to make sure that if it does exist, to see if there's any keys in the .ssh directory. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm just going to list the contents, right? So I'm going to say ls tac al .ssh. So a lot of this, some of the difficulty around generating SSH keys, especially if you're a first-time terminal user, is just figuring out how to work, navigate the terminal, right? So you see I have a config in there. I have an ID _RSA. Those are my public and private keys that I'm using for GitHub right now. I'm going to delete those and create a new set of keys as part of this video. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just going to delete the, let me see what's in the config file, cat config. Okay, I got a change over there. Well, actually, I'm just going to do this. cat, which is a command that just prints the contents of a file to the console. cat.ssh/config. And just see what's in that file. And it says, yep, host, add keys to SSH agent, use key. Okay, right. So this file gets created after we go through some steps. So to start with a clean slate on this macOS machine, I am going to delete. I'm just going to say rm tech rf .ssh. I don't recommend you do this. But anyway, now if I do, so this would be like if you have not created an SSH key ever, and you do a ls tech al on your home directory, you're more than likely going to see something like this, like there's no SSH directory. All right. So create the SSH directory, mkdir .ssh. Boom. Hit return, and now I'll do an ls tech al. And we have our .ssh directory. So you do that on every machine. So let me pull over Windows. All right, so here I'm using Git for Windows, which provides this Git bash. Right, so I'll make this a little bit bigger. And I'll just do an ls tech al. And scroll up here. You know, this is like an installation of a like a stripped down version of Linux. So there's my SSH directory. That's why you see a lot of these, you know, symbolic links here. But it works great. If you just need a, what Git for Windows does is it provides you with an open source development environment that includes Git, right? It's an easy way to get Git, and it's an easy way to get a bash terminal. So there's my SSH directory. Let me just do a list of contents, ls tag al .ssh. Same thing. I'm going to delete the .ssh, so rm tag rf .ssh. All right. Oh, I'm sorry. rm tech r right, and then .ssh. All right, ls. All right, ls tech al, just to make sure I have deleted that and it is gone. All right. Okay, so now that's my Windows. So my Windows is on a clean slate, and I'm going to pull over Linux. I'm using Linux Mint, which is Debian Ubuntu derived. It's a really nice version. It's pretty user friendly. So again here, ls tech al, and I can see I have my SSH. Let me just list the contents, ls tech al .ssh. I've got the same thing. So if you notice I had the same key, private and public, in all these different VMs, ID_RSA. Because, you know, I didn't want to bother generating separate keys. I'll generate separate keys for each of these, so that you can see repeated, right, how these keys are generated and how they're used. All right. So, all right. So I'm going to delete rm tag r.ssh, and then ls tag al. All right, so my .ssh directory is gone. And okay, so let's start. I'm going to start with macOS. So I've created the .ssh directory over here, and let's go to the next step. So you've created your .ssh. Okay. Let's go back here. This is my Linux machine. So mkdir.ssh, and then ls tag al, and there's my .ssh directory. For Windows, do the same thing. If it's not there, mkdir, let me click the window, .ssh, and then ls tag al. And there is my .ssh directory. All right, so I've done that. Next step. All right, so just proceeding down. So figure 1 shows that you have your SSH. If you don't have it, use the makedir.ssh. So I recommend creating a temp directory. Okay, so pull over macOS, and the reason for the temporary directory is so that we can practice generating SSH key generation. Okay, so I'm going to say mk. First off, I don't think I have a temp directory existence, and if I did, it wouldn't matter because it's just temp anyway, right? So mkdir temp. Now this is not a hidden directory, just temp, tmp. Right, and then we just do if we do an ls, we can just see that there's our temp directory. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing for Windows. All right, okay, I already have a temp directory, so I'm just going to rm-rf, I'm sorry, rm-r tmp, and then ls. I don't see my temp directory, so mkdir tmp and then ls. There's my temp directory. So my Windows, I've created it on my temp. The temp directory on Windows, same thing. I already have it, right? I've done this. I've set these keys up, so I followed my own process. So I'm just going to remove rm tmp -r tmp. The -r removes the directory, and then so we'll do another ls, and we see there's no temp directory there. And mkdir tmp, and then ls. All right, so I have a temp directory. Now I recommend changing. Let's go through the steps. Right. So once again, we're creating this temp directory in your home directory, right? So that's ~temp. So this is going to provide us space to generate our SSH keys, right? We're just going to go into this directory and we're going to generate keys until we figure out the steps, right? Because usually when you first do this, you're going to be like, I have no idea what I'm doing, and that's perfectly understandable. Okay, we have our temp directory. Now we move on to actually generating the keys, okay? And again, this is the same for all operating systems, right? So we're still in section 3. Okay, so let's move on to generating SSH keys. I meant section 4. We are still in section 4, section 4.3, generate SSH keys. So let's do this. There's a big old note here. So the note says, be careful. When you generate the key, the output location will be, by default, I should say, the ~/.ssh directory. Now, if there's no keys there, then you're okay, right? But if you just use the default settings, you're in danger of overwriting keys that may already exist. I'm assuming we're starting from a clean slate, right? But if you already have keys, you just have to be careful. That's why I recommend sticking them in the temp directory for practice until you get what you want, and then copy them over to the .ssh. So the command is pretty simple. It's right here. We're going to use the ssh-keygen command. And this comes with macOS, Linux, and Windows. Okay, so I'm going to use the macOS VM. And I'm just going to pull this up so I can see it while I'm typing. I'll do it over here. So I'm just going to scroll up here. All right. Should be able to see. All right. So down here at the bottom, actually, I think what I'll do is I'll arrange it. I'll arrange it this way. I'll make this just a little bit bigger, smaller. Okay. And I'll bring this down. So the command's down here. All right. And then select that VM one more time. There we go. Okay, so that command that I'm going to follow is down there at the bottom. And we should be able to see this on the screen. I'll make it just a little bit bigger. There we go. And stretch this out. Okay, so let me explain what's going on here. We've got this SSH Keygen, SSH key. Actually, first things first, right? I'm in my home directory. Change to your temp directory, cd tmp, right? All operating systems. Change to your temp directory. As you can see, I have my prompt set up so I can see what directory I'm in. Yours may not look like this. More than likely, it looks nothing like it, but just make sure you're in the right directory. Okay, and then I'm going to type the SSH Keygen. So SSH Keygen. All right. Oh, gen. I can't type. Okay, SSH-Keygen. TAC-T. Now the TAC-T specifies the algorithm that you're going to use, the cryptographic algorithm to generate the key. So ED25519 is fine. ED255, okay, 19. Okay, space. TAC-C says this is the email that you're going to use, right? So whatever your GitHub email, my GitHub email is rick@pulpfreepress.com. Okay. Now, first off, let's go to the next. When you hit this, right, nothing's going to happen. It's going to ask you a question, right? So you're in your temp directory. You type in the SSH Keygen TAC-T and then use the ED25519 algorithm, -C, and then put whatever email you used to create GitHub, hit return. Now you have a decision to make. Enter the file in which to save the key. If you just hit enter, this is why I want you to pause for a second. If you just hit enter, it will generate a key, public and private, two keys, right? The public key and the private key. It will save them into the .ssh directory by default, no matter where you're at, right? And it will name them ID_ED25519, which is fine if you wanted to do that, right? If you've never generated keys before. But what I recommend is that you name that key something that's kind of unique to you, right? It's totally optional. But if you don't give it a name, and this is the critical part, if you just hit return, it's not going to generate it. So I'm going to hit return to show you what happens, right? So if I just hit return, and then enter a passphrase, I'm not going to enter a passphrase at this point. So it generates the key, right? However, if we do a ls here in the temp directory, there's no keys, right? So if you're wondering, where the hell did my keys go? They are in the ls, hang on, // They're in that SSH directory because that's where it automatically put them. So you see that that's where it put the keys, right? So I'm going to erase rm //.ssh/* Be careful if you use this, you might kill yourself. So then I'm just doing list that directory again to make sure everything is clear and it's empty. All right, so now back to, I'm just hitting up arrow, right, for my bash history. I'm going back to this. Okay, so this command, that's why I say you got to practice with this stuff, right, to get what you want. So I'm just going to hit return. And I'm going to just give it a name. So I'm on my Mac, right? So I think I'm going to name this key, and it's a virtual machine. So I'm going to say Mac _ VM dev key, right? Now when I do that, it'll generate it in that temp directory. Okay, so let's hit return. This time I'm going to enter a password. So, because I want to show you how to add this, I guess right here, let's talk for a second about passphrases. I recommend using a passphrase, but it's not 100% necessary, right? In fact, on macOS, I'd use a passphrase because macOS kind of makes it easy to then register this key with the operating system, and then you enter the password once, and then you don't have to keep re-entering the password. However, on Windows and Linux, that doesn't seem to work too well, right? It'll prompt you every time once for your password. So you have to enter your key password whenever that private key gets registered with the shell or with the OS, right? You'll have to enter that password every time, once at least per session, right? And so sometimes you may not want to be hassled entering your password, right? So it really is a trade-off. If you're just using this for like GitHub and you can fairly certainly guarantee that that key is not going to be compromised, then I would say don't use the passphrase or don't enter a passphrase. Just leave it blank, right? But for the most part, you want to make sure that your private keys are well guarded and not compromised. Okay, so I'm going to use a password. So I'm going to enter it in. Let me make sure. Let me just, let me do this. And it'll ask you to verify. So if I screwed up, it'll say so. All right, so it generated. Okay. Now, this stuff, you don't need to worry about this. It just generates this interesting output when you create the key, right? What you do want to do is then do an ls on your temp directory and take a look. And it's like, okay, I got my keys. All right. Now, what do I do with them, right? So once you have your key generated and you're happy with it, which I'm happy with it, right? Then you can copy them. So I'm going to copy these. So CP. Well, actually, before I do anything, I got my key generated, right? Let's go to the instructions. The instructions just go through exactly what I said. Okay, so like I say, before you hit return, just be sure that you understand that if you just hit return when you generate the key without giving it a file name, it'll save those to the .ssh. This is just a little bit of review. Here's what that SSH Keygen command, here's what each piece means. All right, so the SSH-Keygen is the command that generates SSH keys. The -t argument specifies the type of keygen algorithm. In this case, the TED25519 is using that algorithm to create the key. And then your GitHub email. Okay. So the -c says it's a comment. So I'm just using that as a comment. Okay. And then GitHub requires that you add your GitHub email account in the comment. Okay. So that's the purpose of the $C. All right. Now we come down, we see, I've created the key. So you should see something very similar when you create your key. In this case, I just named it the same, right? ID. Like I said, if I didn't give it a name here, right? If I didn't give it a name, it would stick it in the SSH directory. Here, I named it the same thing it would be, and it put it in the temp. This is in the instructions, right? So just letting you see what, just to explain what you see in these figures. All right. So now if we take a look at what is the public key, right? What is the public key? Let me move my Linux machine out of the way, go back to my Apple VM. If we do a cat, the public key is just really a text string, cat mac vm dot pub. If I just do a cat, then we see it's just this. Let me stretch this out longer, right? That's your key. SSH ED 255, Secure Shell ED 255.19, and then you've got this randomized text, and then your email address. That's what it should look like, right? In fact, we'll come back to this in a second, and we'll copy this, okay? So you come down here. We're just verifying what you see here, okay? And to be clear, your character string and your email will be different from what you see in this video, right? Or in these instructions here. And like I say, some things to consider. You can name your keys anything that you want, right? And like I say in the instructions, I sometimes use the term dev key or GitHub key. But, using the default name is fine. All right. Now, next step, let's add our public key to GitHub. And that's in the following section. Okay, let's add the public key to GitHub. So if you haven't already done so, log in to your GitHub account. I'm going to go there right now. I'm logged in. You're going to want to click on your drop down under your profile image and go to Settings. You want to scroll down on the left-hand column until you see SSH and GPG keys. Click there. And then in the SSH key section, click New SSH key. And I'm going to call this one Mac VM dev key, just like that. Leave the key type authentication key. Go to your temp directory where you generated the keys. I'm going to do an ls. You see that you have two keys there. You want to list the contents of the public key, so that will be cat space mac, and then just hit tab, dot, and hit tab, and then hit return, and that will print the contents of that public key to the console. Then you just want to copy that, right? Select that whole string. Everything from the beginning of SSH to the end of your email address, and hit right-click. I think this works on just about every OS, Linux, Mac OS, and Windows. Copy. Go back to the key text field. Right-click, paste. All right, and then ignore the red, right, and just hit Add SSH key. So now you've added the public key to GitHub. That was it. That didn't take very long. Now let's register the private key with the SSH agent. All right, going through the instructions, we just finished adding the public key to GitHub, so I'm just going to scroll down here. We're still in section 4. All operating systems, this is the same steps. All right, we've added our public key. And once we do that, then we're going to register the private key with the SSH agent. And that is in section coming up here. Okay, 4.5. 4.5, we're in add private key to SSH agent. So, you don't need GitHub anymore. So I'm going to go to macOS, and I'm just going to follow the step, right? I'm going to I'm going to type in this command here, eval quote $ parenthesis SSH agent dash start, right? That'll start it in the background. So let me just make sure I get that command right here. So eval quote $ parenthesis SSH agent dash S in parenthesis end quote, hit return. That gives you a PID. Now, before we actually add it, I'm going to copy. I'm in the temp directory, so I want to copy my keys. Let's make this window a little bit bigger. I'm going to copy my keys, so I'm going to do an ls real fast here in the temp. I'm going to copy both of these keys to the SSH directory. So I'm going to say cp, okay, star, because I'm in that directory. I want both keys. To // .ssh/ hit return, and then I can change directory to // .ssh. I'm going to clear my screen, and I'm doing ls, and I see that I have both my keys up here in my SSH directory. And now that I do that, I'm going to add the private key. So I'm scrolling down here. SSH-add key name. So I'm going to type SSH-add and key name. So this will be mac_VM dev key, and I'm going to hit return. And it says enter passphrase. So I used a passphrase for these. So almost gave away my passphrase. Hit return, enter it again. Okay, well, anyway, it just took one time, right? So now that key's been registered. So that's how you add your key, your private key, to the SSH agent. So in the next section, we're going to test this private key. Okay, just finished adding the SSH private key. The SSH private key to the SSH agent. Next step is to test, right? So we're going to test the SSH key. And that's fairly easy. So you just open back up a terminal. I'm going to go back to macOS. And like I said, I'm going to do this on the other two OSs too, right? So if you're using Windows, don't cry. It's coming, right? So essentially, you've added the public. So let's just review kind of quickly where we're at. You generated the keys. You added the public key to GitHub. You added the private key to your machine's SSH agent, okay? And if you go, well, we'll get to the GitHub piece in a second, but let's just test it like this. So we're down here in section we're in section 5 now. So we've already generated, right? So this testing is a little different, I think, on each OS, right? So we're going to go to section 5. Scroll down, and we're going to execute this command, ssh-t git at github.com. Okay, so we're just going to come over here on macOS. My machine thinks I'm trying to send an email to github.com, but that is not true. So let's just go back here. All right. Sorry for all the clicking back and forth. Okay. SSH -t git at github.com. Hit return. And it says the authenticity of host GitHub can't be established. That's fine. Fingerprint is blah, 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 blah. Are you sure you want to continue connecting? Hit yes. Just type yes and hit return. Okay. And it says permanently added GitHub to the list of known hosts. So now if I do a dir, what does that mean? Known hosts, right? All right. Most importantly, the bottom line is, hi, Pulp Free Press, you've successfully authenticated, but GitHub does not provide shell access. Okay, fine. All we did was just test the key. Let's just list the directory now, the SSH directory, and we'll see that it's created this known hosts folder. That's where that comes from. All right. Now you can test it with a repo, and we'll do that in the next section. Okay, we've successfully tested the SSH key with this SSH -t get at GitHub command, right? And we got the successful message, right? You should see something like this. It won't say Pulp Free Press, but it'll be close. All right. That creates the known host folder in your SSH directory. So now let's test this with a repo. So go back to GitHub, okay, and go to your main repo page. Now, if you're just created your account, you more than likely will not have a repository, right? So I have many repositories, but I'm just going to check one, right? So what you would do is, I'll make a separate video on creating a repo, but when you create a repo, just go ahead and create a repo, right? Like I say, I'll create another video that kind of goes through the steps and some of your considerations, but I'm going to select one called Python scripting right here. And I'm going to click on that one. And then where it says code, right, I'm going to click on the SSH, and I'm going to copy that. Okay. Then I'm going to go over here, and I would change to my dev. If you don't have, you have to save this repo someplace, right? So if you're in my courses, then you know I recommend, or if you read my books, I recommend a dev directory. So I have dir, okay, and I'm going to cd to my home directory. I'm going to do an ls listing to show you I have a dev directory here, right? So I'm just going to go into dev, and ls again, and see what I got. I've got a CST with Python. Okay, I have a temp. All right, so here looks like a good place to go ahead and clone this repo. So the way that you test it is just clone a repository, right? I'm going to hit clone. Oh, sorry, git. This is git, right? So we're using git, clone, and then I'm just going to paste. Oops. I'm going to paste this string right there. Copied. Right click, paste. Okay. Let me pull my VM over all the way. So we're just going to clone that repo, or clone a repo in your repository, right? Using SSH. So git clone. This is the SSH URL when you're cloning a repo. And then hit return. And what that will do, that will create a folder, whatever the name of the repo is. In this case, it's IT-129-Python-scripting. That's the repository name. It will create that folder. But if you get this cloning, then we can go ahead and do a dir or ls. And you should see that repo. So I'm going to change to that directory, IT. All right. And I see I'm in my main. I'm in my main branch, and I'll do another ls. Actually, I'll do a ls tac al. All right, so I have a git ignore, a readme images. I'm just going to create another file, like a test file. So I'm going to say a touch test.txt, okay? And then I'm going to say dir, That's just my shortcut for ls-al. And I see my new file. I'm going to do a git status. And it says I have a new file that I have not yet committed or added. So I'm going to do a git add dot. And then I'm going to do a git status. Just to show you guys like what the different things are. So now it says, hey, I got a new file in my local repo. Then I'm going to do a git commit -m testing new SSH key. Right? And then git push. And it should push to that repo. There we go. Now, if you go back to the repository and you refresh that page, you should see that test.txt file. There's nothing in that file, but the file's there. And that means that your key is working properly and is properly configured. Okay, you saw all the steps. They are practically the same for every operating system, right? Especially on Windows if you're using the git bash window or the terminal. So I'm just going to step through those real fast just to show you that that's the case. And the next one is going to be Windows, but I'm not going to explain everything. I'm just going to go through the steps quicker, all right? So the next section is just me doing everything I just did in Windows without a lot of commentary. Okay, I have just stepped through generating keys, adding the public key to GitHub, adding the private key to the SSH agent in macOS. Used mostly macOS, but we set up our SSH directory and our temp directory for Mac, Windows, and Linux, right? So now I'm in Windows. I'm on Windows 10. Steps will be the same for Windows 11. I'm using a git bash terminal, okay? And I'm just going to go through those steps again real fast. So I'm going to generate another set of keys. SSH-keygen tac t ed 25519 tac capital C for comment, and then it has to be your GitHub email. The email that you use to sign up for GitHub. I'm going to hit return. So make sure everything is correct. SSH-keygen -t ed 25519 capital C, and then your email address, and hit return. Now it says enter a file. I'm going to change the name of this file. I'm going to call it the win VM dev key. Hit return. And I'm going to no passphrase this time. Passphrases are kind of a pain on Windows and Linux, right? Probably need a whole nother video on how to deal with that. So I'm going to say no passphrase, right? And I'm fine with that for here. So no passphrase. I'm going to do a ls. I see I've got my keys. Now I'm going to cat the contents of my public key so I can copy that to GitHub. So cat win vm.pub. I'm copying this whole, let me stretch this out. All right, that didn't automatically resize, so let me go ahead and do that again just to make sure I'm not getting any stupid characters. All right, so I'm going to copy this, right, that string, and if you do a right-click copy, that should work. So I'm going to go to back to GitHub, go to your settings, go to SSH keys. I'm going to create a new SSH key. I'm going to call it win VM dev key. And I'm going to right click and paste. Alrighty. Add SSH key. Now I'm going to add the SSH key to my SSH agent, the private key. First, I'm going to copy those keys over to the SSH directory. So let me just scroll down here for those instructions. Once again, It's always so long. I don't understand why it's taking so long. All right, let's just do this. Let's go this way. Coming down. All right. So we added our public key to GitHub. God, this window is updating slow. We're almost there. I just want to make sure I'm getting the command right. That's all. All right. Oh, hang on. Jeez. Okay. Almost there. I'll cut this stuff out of the... All right. Now, let's go back to the Windows. Okay, so it is eval SSH agent. So this is Windows. So eval, EVAL, quote, $, SSH agent, -s, in parentheses, end quote. Let's just make sure I didn't dork anything up there. Hit return. We get a process ID, and we're going to go do copy, right? I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Copy star /.ssh/h/ cp star /.ssh/cd SSH dot. All right. ls. There's my keys. All right. So now I'm going to add the private key. So SSH add when dev key. All right. So identity added. Okie dokie. There was no need for a passphrase because there was no passphrase. And now I'm going to test the key by doing the old test down here. So we added the key, and we're just going to do the test again. Always follow the instructions just so you don't make too big of a mistake. All right, so SSH. So we've added the key to GitHub, right? So this should work. SSH tac capital T git at github.com. All right, authenticate host, and just type yes, hit return, and it says, hey, you successfully authenticated. All righty, that was Windows. All right, we don't need to go through the steps would be the same for verifying that it works with the repo. If it works this way, it'll work with your repo. All right, so let's go now to Linux. Okay, isn't this fun? We're going to go through that whole process one more time with Linux. So let me pull over my Linux VM. Okay, clear. Okay, so dir, I'm in my temp directory. See, hey, nothing up my sleeve. All right, so SSH -keygen -t ed 25519 for the algorithm. capital C, and then email for your GitHub account. Hit return. Well, check it. SSH-keygen -t ed 25519 capital C for comment, and for GitHub it has to be your email, your GitHub email address. Hit return. It says what you want to name it. I'm going to name this Linux VM dev key. Hit return. No passphrase. No passphrase. Do it ls. I got my two keys. I'm going to cat my pub key. I'm going to stretch that out. Make sure I don't screw it up. I'm going to copy that. Right click and copy. go back to your GitHub SSH key page, right? I'm going to create another one. You obviously don't need to do this, right? But I am. I'm going to create a new SSH key. And the title is going to be Linux VM dev key, like that. And I'm just going to paste that in there. Hit add SSH key. Now we're going to add the private key. So before I do that, I'm going to copy cp star to /./.ssh/ and then change /./.ssh directory, and then do an ls. I've got both my keys there. And then I need to start. So eval quote. Oh, let me just check that command. Right. So I'm going to scroll down real fast here to start the. I added that to GitHub. This is where I really should write these things down separately, right? I haven't done that. This is a good idea for your engineer's notebook. Make sure you list these steps down because chances are you'll have to do this a couple times, right? You don't want to be fumbling through. I should put a little cheat sheet table in here at the end. All right, so almost there. Now we're going to add, we got to start the eval agent, right? I mean, the SSH agent. So go back to Linux. That's the command I'm looking for right there, right? So eval, yep, quote, $ SSH-agent -s in parentheses, quote, we get our PID, right? We go SSH-add, right? And then the private key, which is Linux with no pub on it, right? Identity added, okay? And then once we do that, we test. We go SSH, capital T, git at GitHub. I'm sorry. My mind's like a sieve. Let's go down here to the testing. It is the command. Oh. All right, git, yeah, it is git. All right, test git at github.com. All right, hit return. Yes, type yes. And you're done. So, well, you've added that, right? So if it works, it tested, you're good to go. All right. One last section I'm going to record here for this video, and that is how to not have to enter the passphrase on macOS. If you're in Windows, there's a little trick. I'll also do that too. So if you entered a passphrase, then you're going to have to, enter that passphrase each time you log into the shell. I don't know of a way to do it automated in Linux. I might have to do more research, but on Mac, it's pretty easy to do. You create a config. All right. So I'm going to do that in the next section. Okay, you got your keys generated, you got your public key up in GitHub, you've added your private key, you've tested them, you've cloned a repo, everything's working fine. If you use the passphrase, you might want to add the key to the agent automatically. I'm going to have to check this out with no passkey, but I'm in section 7 of the guidance document, and in section 1, macOS, I'm going to create a config file. Now, where it says identity file, this is the name of the private key that you're going to add, right? So in this example, I use the private key name ID. In this example, I'm going to say Mac VM dev key, right? So you'll see it here in a second. So anyway, I'm just going to pull this up so I can see it, right? I'm going to have to move this over a little bit. Like there we go. All right, so I don't need this to be quite so long. There we go. So now I'm in my let me get out of this repo directory. I'm going to go cd tilde /.ssh. So I'm in my SSH, and this is where you want to create this. So if we do a ls, we see that we've got 3 things in here now. We've got unknown hosts. That's what it creates, right, when you add the key to your SSH. Let's go over here real fast. I'm going to see if that actually gets created. So if I do an ls in Linux, yes, it's got a known hosts file in there now. All right, so I've got a known host, a Mac VM dev key private key, and a Mac VM dev key public key. Now I'm going to use VI config. Okay. Just like that. Insert hosts, HOST, space, star. Next line, come over a space, add keys, keys to agent. And I'm going to slide this VM over so we can see the full command set here. Okay. Add keys to agent, space, yes. Return, space. Use keychain. This is a macOS, yes. Return. Identity file. Well, actually, space. Identity, IDENTITY, file, space, tilde, that's your home directory, .ssh / and then for me, it's Mac VM dev key. Okay. And once you get that, I think that's it. I'll hit return, and then escape : right quit. All right. Now if I do a dir, I see I've got my config file, my known host, my Mac dev key, and my Mac VM dev key pub. All right. Okie dokie. So now whenever let's say if I log out and quit iterm2, and then come back in to iterm. I'm going to have to make this window bigger. I love Mac because, like in iterm, right, you just hit Command plus, and it makes your text and your font and everything bigger. Of course, you know, if you're programming on macOS, you're programming in a certified Unix operating system. A lot of people don't realize that. You can Google it. If you got Google Chops, you can verify that. It is a little different from Linux, right? But it is a nice certified Unix POSIX compliant OS. Very powerful. All right, so at this point now, I'm going to go to my repo. So cd dev / dev.classes. Actually, let's just go to dev. See what I did there. I'm on my VM. All right. So I've got IT, so I'm going to change to cd it 129. That's my repo that I cloned. If I do a dir, I've got that test file. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to edit that test file. So I'm going to do vi test.txt, hit return, and I'm just going to insert some stuff. All right, and then I'm going to escape, right quit. Now if I do a git status, it should show I have one modified file. And if I do a git add dot, all right, and then if I do a git commit -m modified test.text. All right. And then git push. I don't know how I got up with that one. It says enter the dev key. All right, I probably have to do this once. All right, so now if I do a push, well, I'm not going to be able to do a push right away. But anyway, once you enter that key once, then it should be registered, and you should be good to go. All right, so anyway, that's it for Windows. It's a little different. You have to add some lines to your, let's just go ahead and do that, right? So in Windows and Linux, they both work about the same, right? So in the bash profile, so I'm going to vi dot bash profile. Let's see what I got here. I got to go back to my home directory, cd bash profile. All right, so insert, come down here, return, and then eval $. Essentially what you do is you start the SSH agent and then add it to it. $. And then the path to your key. So this one is a Windows win underscore vm underscore dev key. Okay, like that. And then hit return, escape, right quit. And then I think you do source bash underscore profile. All right, so it'll say identity added. Well, the reason why is, right, you didn't have to enter a passkey. It just added that identity. So if you go to, if you cloned your repo, then things should just work fine. All right, and the same for Linux. All right, and that's about it. That's all I have to demo. And like I say, if you're my students, right, if you have questions, let me know. But this should have been pretty thorough. I hope this helped. Have a great day, guys.